Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. If you are interested in working with me in person, you now have the opportunity with Soul Discovery Workshop. We will spend 2 days discovering your spiritual gifts, unlocking your abilities to channel, to really tap into your intuition, to meet your guides and your angelic team, as well as diving in to the Akashic records. If you are interested and you are in the Huntington Beach, LA area, or even if you're not and you feel like taking a short trip, please head to my website at infinitesoullove.com and you can head to the store. Right there, you will find the Soul Discovery Workshop, which is September 16th and 17th, 2023. Hello, and welcome back to The Heart of You. Today, I have with us Corilee Fox. And Corilee is an intuitive coach, a soul reader, as well as the CEO of Up and to the Right Coaching and Consulting. She specializes in supporting clients in their self-healing journeys so they can live more expansive and connected lives. And today we're going to be discussing a couple of different topics. And first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about our reparenting journey for ourselves. Like, how do we reparent ourselves in light of, let's say, childhood trauma or childhood challenges that we had with our parents or growing up. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about how you as a parent can consciously raise your children in a way that helps them grow and potentially allows them to develop their gifts. Corilee, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much. I love your podcast, Annette. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I want you to give a little background about your journey and how you got to where you are now.
All right. Okay. Well, it probably goes back to when I was a kid. I was raised in a Pentecostal church. And, we were there 4 times a week. Mom and dad were deacons and ran Sunday school and the whole thing. And when the services got rocking and rolling, as they do in the Pentecostal church, I could feel the spirit. I could feel the source energy.
Oh,
and
cool.
I didn't have words for it. I didn't know what was going on, but
Yeah.
I was there. And then my late teens, early 20s, I was kind of done with church. It wasn't aligning with who I was. I didn't want to be in the little box with all the rules. And so I left, and I kind of threw out the whole God thing too.
Okay.
Because I'd kind of been given a couple of different versions. It was confusing. It was like, on the one hand, unconditional love and always there and you can't lose it. But then there was this other God that if you didn't toe the line, bad things could happen to get you back into line.
Right.
And I look back on it now and I think, the people who gave me that version, the angry God version, were probably trying to protect me and keep me safe. I understand that now. But at the time, that scared me to death. And so I was like, you know what? Done with it all.
Right.
And so then a number of years later, I was going through a dark night of the soul. I had moved to a new city with a boyfriend. We'd broken up and I was completely unmoored. I was so lonely. I was turning myself inside out and, of course, beating myself up about it too. If I was a more social person or doing all the right things, I wouldn't feel this way. And I discovered meditation. I'd go to the Buddhist center once a week for their open meditation, and they would talk about things like life can be hard and you don't need to add the suffering. You don't need to add the resistance and say, I shouldn't be feeling this way and making it even worse for yourself. And so I would be good for about a day or two. And then back in my emotional mess,
Yeah.
I had this inkling that, maybe I don't have to feel this way. And then the other thing that happened was I started developing a painful hip thing. And I thought, I guess I should try this yoga thing. I had tried it once before and thought it was the most boring way someone could spend their time. But I found a more active school of yoga and I was doing it at home. This was before all the studios and the online stuff. And what would happen is I would spend an hour doing all my poses and stuff. And at the end, I would be lying on my yoga mat and I would feel that connection again. And
Mm.
this was huge because, I've got serious overthinking brain.
Okay.
It would actually quiet down a bit.
Sure.
And when I was a kid and we went through tough times, fight and flight wasn't available to my nervous system. So I froze. I had no needs, no
Oh, okay.
emotions. My body was simply a brain taxi.
Yeah.
And so yoga completely shifted this. I started feeling some energy move through and started getting connected again. And so I would lie on my back on my yoga mat in Shavasana with, tears rolling down into my ears, feeling that unconditional love that I had been told about in church. Not the angry, cranky God kind of connection, but the unconditional love kind. And then it woke up my intuition, and I started hearing, downloads from my higher self.
Right. So during that process of when you were rediscovering that feeling that you had when you were at church and then when you were in the yoga studio, did you recognize the similarities between the two experiences, and did you recognize that, oh, okay, this has nothing to do with church and religion? Did you realize that at the time, or did you just sort of go with it?
Yes, absolutely realized it had nothing to do with, the religious structure, that
Yeah.
this was the feeling. This was the
Yeah.
feeling that was possible to me, and then I discovered it wasn't necessarily yoga related. I could feel it out in nature. I could feel it while I meditated. There were so many paths to it.
Mm,
But yeah, I recognized it from when I was a kid because, as I think is the case with all of us, our natural state is to be connected,
right.
but things get in the way and mess us up and
Well,
knock us off.
life gets in the way, all of the things.
Yeah.
Right. So, when did you decide that you were going to explore this further and start to really get into, let's say, the meat of the healing journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes back to the meditation thing,
Mm,
where I was in such a dark place and I was, having such a tough time and I was being so, so hard on myself. And just understanding that by shifting my perspective and, I was nowhere near this, but my self-healing journey has been about having some compassion for what I'm going through and having acceptance of what I'm feeling has been such a game changer for me. And
mm.
so, yeah, and so that's what's really made the difference.
So, what was your process? I mean, aside from the meditation and yoga, what was sort of the next step after that?
Mhm. So I think besides self-compassion and acceptance, I think a really big one was learning how to manage my emotions.
Mm,
And,
yeah.
because none of us are ever taught, and we feel them every day, and we either go into suppress, 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 or be completely overwhelmed by them. And
Right.
so, there's lots of great techniques for taking the middle ground. I actually have a great guided meditation on my website for free if anyone wants to check it out. It kind of uses the RAIN method that Tara Brach talks about. But, a real quick way that I've found that I love, I had gone to a Reiki session and she was unblocking a brick of emotions in my chest. And
Mm.
as she was doing it, I started feeling, loss and frustration and disappointment. And I was like, wow, where is this coming from? So in the car on the way home, love being in the car where you can talk to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
started, going through the inventory. It's like, I feel disappointment because, X hasn't turned out the way I thought it should. And that's okay. I
Yeah.
feel frustration that this hasn't, gone the way I thought. And that's okay. And every time I okayed, I felt a little layer of relief, right? Because
Mm.
our resistance is such an energy suck, right? We
Yeah.
spend
Oh,
so much,
100%.
oh, pushing it
Yeah.
away. This isn't okay. What's wrong with me that I'm feeling this way?
Yeah.
And instead, going into acceptance makes me go, "Ah." And then
Mm.
once we get into that peaceful state, then we can get creative, right? What can I learn
Right.
from these emotions? What are they telling me? If I'm angry, has someone crossed me? Great. Let's use that anger to find a new way to operate in the world and learn how to say no or whatever it is.
Right.
Or is there something I need to honor within myself? If I have these emotions stuck in my body. How do I work them out? Is this time for a dance party in the living room, or getting some energy work done, or one of my favorites, rage vacuuming, right? I get all the
Rage vacuuming.
I get all the yayas out, and I get a clean house afterwards too.
I don't think I've ever heard of that before. That is incredible. I love that. Rage vacuuming.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
a new tool for your toolkit there in it.
Yeah. I usually, when I'm vacuuming, I'm more concerned about my cat freaking out rather than, because cats they don't like the vacuum. They just don't. No. So you have all these tools now in your tool belt, and you are now sharing these tools with others and helping others on their self-healing journey. Now, everybody sort of comes at this in a different way. Everybody has their own way of self-healing. They have their own journeys on the spiritual path. And sometimes people will say, oh, I don't feel like you need to go into the past in order to heal. Or I don't think that there is a reason to heal or a need to heal because you have to be in the present moment, that kind of thing. So can you talk to me a little bit about your reasoning and approach for why self-healing is important on the spiritual journey?
Well, I think number one is that you're running into it all the time anyways,
Yeah.
right? Somebody says something and you automatically go, blah, and then go, oh, what did I just say? And now I'm going to have to walk that back or apologize or whatever. And so when we can get clear on our stories, befriend our emotions, and learn how to process all that stuff and understand where we get hooked and where we get blocked, that makes such a huge difference. And, the other thing is that, bringing it to the Annette soul Akashic level reasoning is that this is our job. It's our job to work through these lessons. Our soul has decided what it wants to experience and what it wants to work on. And that can actually be a really great way to not take it so personally. It's like, if I have an unworthiness wound, it's not pointing to unworthiness. It's just something I need to work on. And yes, I may have had experiences when I was a kid where somebody said, something that made me feel unworthy, but that was what my soul chose for me to go through. And so it's always an inside job first, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that you're unworthy, but how are you going to work with this? And how are you going to bring yourself back? How are you going to catch yourself when you get lost in that story and say, no, I'm not retelling that and looping that in my brain at 3:00 in the morning. I'm going to stop, And another great strategy my friend Lisa Malcolm told me about is stop, drop, and roll. So when you find yourself getting stuck or getting lost or feeling overwhelmed, you notice it rather than going, if that person wasn't such a jerk, I would be happier. Or if that situation hadn't happened, I'd feel grounded and centered. Instead of doing that, you bring it in. You stop, drop inside. What's going on? Do the work with the emotions I talked about. Do the work with the stories. Figure out what your belief is in the situation. And is that really, really true? Try to notice your pattern. What's the place you get stuck all the time? And does it serve you? Okay, what else could you do? What else could you try? What could you test drive this time? And then when you finish doing the work, how can you roll with it? Yeah, the emotions are here. And once you label them and accept them, then they'll flow and then they'll go, or how can you try something new and check it out? It doesn't matter what the outcome is. You've tried something. You've taken action. You're not a victim here. You're not lost in what's going on. You have a little bit of control here. And that makes such a difference.
It really does. And you don't have to worry about missing the opportunity to work on this because the universe will give you plenty of opportunities to do so. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I did it wrong this time. Okay, that's okay. You're going to get another chance. So don't worry about that. As we are practitioners and we're helping other people through this journey, I always like to make it very clear that I'm still on my healing journey. I don't really feel like there's a place where you can get that you are 100% perfect and everything is great. Like it is about, as you said, sort of managing those timeframes and how long it takes. So, maybe 5 years ago when I was in a particular emotional state or an emotional trigger, it would take, 6 months to get through that emotion. Whereas now it takes, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the severity, but it's like, oh, I feel an emotion. Oh, hi, emotion. Cool. Where are you coming from? And why are you here? And it's sort of that that ability to take a look at it and say, oh, wait, are you present in this moment? Are you actually real right now? Because if you're not, if you're from 10 years ago, you don't need to hang around anymore. You're cool to go. You can take a break. You can go to Tahiti and have a margarita. Like, you don't have to be here anymore, right? So it's so much about that fear of facing that emotion. And so many people, I think, feel that they are going to die from their emotions, right? From one perspective, it can have a physical effect on our bodies. It can have a physical effect on us in general, as far as our energetic field and everything else. So these things are going to pop up regardless of whether you want to or not, whether you want to work on this or not. It's gonna come up. If somebody is not in that space of being able to recognize, because it is hard to recognize if you're in it, if you're really in it, that like you said, the dark night of the soul, when you're in that place, it's really hard to see. What would you recommend for somebody who is in that place of not being able to see, not being able to know what are the next steps to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your suggestions for that?
Yeah. I mean, so often it's finding the language for these things. And,
Mm,
I think that's been behind most of my self-help book reading is somebody tell me what's going on and how do I put words to this? How do I put language to this? One of the
yeah.
books I read most recently was Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And
Oh,
it's not very long. It's like 200 pages, but man, it goes through all the potentials and you can kind of go, "Oh yeah, that resonates. No, no, that wasn't me." And actually allow you to recognize it. Because when we're able to name something or give language to it, it's so powerful because it helps us detach just a little bit rather
mm-hmm.
than this swirling around. I can say, "Oh yeah, that's X or that's Y." And it gives me just a little bit of control and just a little bit of space. So that can be really powerful. And there's so many great resources out there. I mean, I follow the holistic psychologist on Instagram and TikTok, and she's does such a great job of talking about the patterns we can get stuck in and how our nervous system operates, and she tells her own stories, and resources like that can be so, so powerful. And also building our own self-awareness, journaling. And I know people roll their eyes at journaling. It doesn't have to be a book. It
No.
can be voice notes into your phone. It can be bullets into a private document that's passworded so no one ever reads it, and you can, get it all out, even the
Yeah.
yucky stuff, even the unattractive stuff, so that you can go back and go, "Oh yeah, this came up a couple of months ago and this is how I handled it." And so you build your familiarity with it and you build your skill in how to deal with it and how to process it. And that builds your confidence, that builds your resilience, and that doing the work helps you feel like, "You know what? I got my own back here. I'm not, dependent on everyone else to fix this. I got my own back too."
Yeah. I mean, that's basically the reparenting of yourself,
Mm,
right?
yes.
Because it's probably more common now for people, let's say between the ages of, I would say maybe 40 to 60, that parents of those people in that generation really didn't focus a lot on this self healing journey. They didn't really focus on a lot of these things. And so I know I heard from both of my parents, we were so young. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't even know what love was. We didn't know anything, so it's like we come into this world expecting something. I'm not sure what it is that we expect. What we expect our parents to have some semblance of knowledge about how the world works and how love works and how, all of this. And as it turns out, oh wow, that's not true, and they didn't know. And so because they were figuring it out as they went along, here I was, or whoever we're talking about, here is a child who is going, oh, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but I guess I'm gonna tag along to what you're doing, even though it feels like it's maybe not quite what it should be doing, but okay, I'll do it anyway. Then when you're able to be, an adult, go through this healing journey and then be able to reparent yourself, you're able to then remove that attachment to needing your parents to be something other than what they are,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And what that does is it actually starts removing that big, big word of blame, like the
Mm,
blaming, right? So, and that's a really big thing in this healing journey is where do you place the blame?
Yeah.
Where is there a place? Is there a place for blame?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in your opinion, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And my parents are the same way. My mom says, "We were just kids from the farm. We didn't know anything."
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, she made a point of doing a couple of things that she had either seen or experienced. She was not going to give us the silent treatment, and she was not going to have favorites among her kids. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean there weren't other issues, because of course they were.
Sure.
You know, of course, since I'm a parent, I get to, have that kind of insight. And I just feel like there is no way that one or two parents can give you 100% of what you need 24/7 for 18 years. There's just
Absolutely
no
not.
way. There's
No.
just no way. And
Mm-mm.
then you think about how life enters the situation. They got to put food on the table. They got to keep a roof over your head. They might need to keep a job on the go. Like, there's so
Mm-hmm.
much happening. And then, we all bring our own challenges to it. Maybe they had health challenges or mental health challenges, undiagnosed, or, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the list just goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
Even the people and the clients that I have that have had really, difficult childhoods, I say to them, if you can just find one time that you knew your parent loved you, valued you, saw you, heard you, that you felt like you belonged, just take that one time. And it's okay. Maybe there was only one time. And yes, that's awful, and feel the loss and the grief around that. Absolutely. But if there was one time, that that feeling was there. Maybe they didn't have the capacity to act on it more than just that one time. Maybe they had so much going on, or the way they were raised was very lacking, right? I mean, we learn from our own parents,
Right.
but you can build on that feeling. You can say, you know what? I was wanted, I was cared for, I was loved, whatever that is. And now I, as a grown up, because now I get to choose, now I'm in control of the situation, I can build on that. I
Right.
know I'm worthy. I know I'm loved. I know I'm valuable. My dog loves me. My dog thinks I'm the greatest thing, right? Or list off a few people that love you, and you
Right.
love you,
Right.
and then make it your practice to take care of that little inner kid, right? The
Yeah.
one that did feel neglected, or that didn't get what she needed, or whatever it is, and you give it to yourself. Because so often, we just mirror the way we were treated. And it's like, no, 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 you get to do it different now. You get to heal those wounds by giving yourself what you need. And that includes acceptance, compassion, and real life practices of self care and noticing what you need, ask for what you need, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think can break patterns of behavior in relationships as you get older, too. Because when people always say you date your mother, or you date your father, or you date a combination of your parents, right? The reason why you do that is because of your wounding.
Yes.
Most of the time, it's because you're looking for a quality that matches, let's say, a wound in one of the behaviors of your parents.
Yep.
And you're looking for that wound to be healed in that other person, so then they can give you that love that you didn't feel you had with your parents, or they can give you that attention, or whatever it happens to be. And so in order to stop doing that, because that's placing really unrealistic expectations on somebody else, of course, you're expecting somebody else to change, you're expecting somebody else to do the work, right? So as opposed to that, what you're talking about is turning it towards yourself and saying, you know what? Yeah, it's time for me to take responsibility for my wounds, for my own wounding, because it may not even be true. And that's the other thing, is that some of the wounds that we have as kids, it's just something that happened in a moment in time. So just as you were saying, think about that moment in time that your parent did love you, even if there was just one tiny moment. It can also happen in the inverse.
Yes.
Which is, your parent loved you most of the time, but there was that one time that they ignored you.
They were tired, they were unhealthy, whatever it was.
Yeah. And that one time that they ignored you, you created a story in your head of, oh, well, my dad doesn't love me because he didn't pay attention to my Lego tower that I was making. Like, it can be something so simple like that. And yet you hold on to it, you grab it, you hold on to it for the rest of your life.
Right.
And
Right.
it's insane that we operate this way. It's insane that we will hold on to something that is, in hindsight, relatively trivial, right?
Mhm.
And we create a whole story around our own worthiness based on that.
Yeah, that's right. But I have to say too, when we do, go out with the same kind of person or carry some of those patterns into our adulthood, we're going with what's familiar. And that's
Yeah.
why attachment theory can be so powerful, is because the way we attached in our family of origin is probably how we're going to do it when we're adults, unless we catch ourselves and decide that we want to do something different. And so then we're back into being able to control that situation. This is why intergenerational trauma and patterns are so handy to look at, is because families literally hand down the playbook of when X happens, you're going to do Y. Here's your response. Here's what you're going to do.
Right.
And it's such a powerful way to say, okay, that was going on. Oh, the buck stops here. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that with my kids. I'm not doing that for myself. I'm going to choose to do it differently. They were doing the best they could. They got stuck
Mhm.
in a loop, but it ends here. And that's
Yeah.
that's such a powerful place too.
So that's a really good segue into talking a little bit about how you apply everything that you've learned for you specifically to your kids, to raising your kids. And this is
Mm,
something that we don't really talk about on this podcast very often, simply because I don't have children. So it's not something that I have experience with. So I would love to hear your process and your take on how you apply this to raising your children, how you kind of catch yourself in those moments of maybe reverting back to patterns from your parents, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's such a great area, Annette, because there's nothing like having kids that will bring up your stuff,
Oh,
right?
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. And so, and my own things that have parenting has really brought to focus for me is I can be a bit of a control freak. I feel like there's a right answer, and if I just work my butt off and make that happen, everything will be okay. And so the idea of letting go of control and trusting and surrendering,
Mhm.
it has been lifelong work for me. And of course, that comes up big time in parenting because I am responsible for these kids. But I'm also understanding that they're on their path and they're on their journey, and working on how can I create a safe space for them to tell me what's going on with them, and not just jump in and fix and save, but help build their awareness of what's going on. And again, the language, right? I have
Right.
two teenage boys. And so I'm like, so is this frustration or is this anger, do you think? Just trying to build that language and the labels for how they feel so that they can understand what they need. And I've gotten better at saying, so what do you think needs to happen here? And then how can I support you? I am here for you, but
Wow.
it's gotta be support, right? They gotta take the
Right.
lead because they've gotta figure out how this is done. This is how we help our kids on their path, and it's so difficult because, just a few years ago, you might have been in high maintenance mode with your kids doing all kinds of stuff, and you gotta have to constantly remind yourself to let go, and, "No, no, they can do that now. No, that needs to be their responsibility now," and on and on. So, yeah, it's quite a journey.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think about how often you hear parents actually ask their children, "What is it that you want?" Or "What is it that you are feeling right now? And do you want to be involved in this family decision? Do you
Right.
want to take part in what we're doing right now?" Like, and usually it is, I shouldn't say usually because that's a broad generalization, but the parenting template, as it's been sort of handed down to us, has been more of a you do as I say. Just do what I do as I say, because I'm your parent, I'm your mother, I'm your father. You
I'm
need
the
to just
boss.
do what I say. Right. And so the child has this lack of empowerment in that space to be able to cultivate who they really are.
Yeah.
And in that creates the rebellion, that creates all of those other things, right?
Yes.
All of those breaking out of the control, or breaking out of that energy of control.
Yeah.
How do you balance the managing, let's say, the sort of control aspect of parenting? Because there is an aspect of control that needs to be there, right? Otherwise your kids are going to be running amok everywhere. But like, how do you balance that control and then trying to do everything you need to do to make sure that you're feeling aligned with your process with the potential of what your kids signed up to experience with you?
Right. Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, I want to touch on something you said there, that the way we were raised, many of us, and the way our parents were raised was a very authoritarian model. It
Yeah.
was top down. It was, I'm the boss. I know. You just, be quiet and get in line. And it wasn't just our parents. I mean, at school, you messed up, you got detention, right?
Yep.
And church might have been along those lines as well. There was all
Absolutely.
kinds of situations where we might have dealt with that. Thankfully, so many parents are moving now is to a little bit more of a collaborative, less authoritarian model. The real huge aha I had with parenting is that if I'm coming from a fear place, I am going to be the worst parent in the world. That's when I go to, you got to do this, you should be this, all the stuff, right? But it's
Yeah.
all me. It's all my stuff,
Yeah.
And so my job, again, inside job, is to get out of that fear place and try to get into a trusting place that my kid is where they need to be. And I'm here to support and kind of direct, right?
Right.
My oldest son has ADHD and dyslexia. I remember when he was in grade 5, he had one of those teachers that, your kid has, these issues and needs to be fixed. And it may not have all been her. I think I was going into a shame and blame place, and I was just
Mm,
so upset and, oh, how are we going to fix this? And how are we going to address these issues? And actually, looking back on it, I am grateful to her. She really pushed us in ways that I was way outside my comfort zone, but she did help us find some good solutions for him. But I was out on a walk one day, and I think I actually might have been listening to a podcast and got
mm,
a download. Like I heard 2 sentences loud and clear that I really needed to hear. And it was, how do I know that this isn't my kid's purpose? How do I
right.
know that this isn't part of his path? How do
Yeah.
I know that he's not going to grow up and help other kids and their parents who have these exact challenges and be able to say, not I've read all the books, but I've been there and I know what you're going through and I know how hard it is, right? And
Yeah.
so then it was like, and so I try to catch myself when I'm in that fear place and I go back to trust. It's like, yeah, I don't know what his life is going to look like. And that's okay. It's his life. It's his life. But how can I help him? And so we get into it with, time management and, learning the skills and learning the emotional awareness and the self-awareness and all of that good stuff that I hope will stand him in good stead as he grows up.
Right. Well, and I really do hope that as things progress with society, that eventually people understand that this way that we've been operating in terms of learning, it doesn't work. You
Yeah.
can't make one way of learning work for 100% of the population. It just doesn't work. Not everybody's brains work that way. Right.
Yes.
And so it's fascinating to me. And this is something that I want to sort of explore further, is because I have a lot of friends who have children who have dyslexia and ADHD, a lot of friends. And it's becoming more and more common that is something that people are having to look at, and being able to look at it from a different perspective, maybe looking at it as a gift, maybe looking at it as a strength, that maybe if you're not weighing it up against the 100% only one way of learning model, then maybe this is a totally cool way of looking at the world,
Mhm.
right? It's the same thing with children who are on the spectrum or anything else. It's like there are so many things that I think are not addressed from a spiritual and energetic standpoint when it comes to children who have ADHD, who have autism and that type of thing. It's like it can be something that empowers them and
Mhm.
helps them move through the world, as long as they have guidance that is not constantly telling them there is something wrong with you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're finally making a shift of not believing that everybody needs to be the same, or if
Yeah.
we're not, that we should fake it, right? That, people with neurodivergent brains have superpowers in particular areas, like we all do.
100%.
I'm skilled in certain areas, you're skilled in certain, and we probably think it's no big deal because it just comes so naturally to us.
Right.
But it's the same with the neurodivergent kids as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk to just people in general, some people have the ability to rattle off dates of history, like there's no tomorrow. They remember all of that. And like for me, I remember the names and places of certain designers and furniture and buildings and architects and things like that. But like that might not be something that you remember because that's not something you studied or that's not something that you were really interested in.
Yeah.
To quantify intelligence or to quantify your experience by one matrix is, yeah, it's just completely unrealistic.
Yeah. And I think that teaching kids to go to feel the energy and feel the interest and go where that is. Where's your
Mhm.
attention taking you? Where's your curiosity taking you? What are you interested in? Can be so powerful. And this goes back to the authoritarian parent thing. The stick was used so much. You have to do this, that, and the other thing. And if you don't, the great skill to have in parenting is, can you find the carrot?
Right.
Can you use punishment as a last, last, last resort? How can you get the kid to say, yeah, I want to do that, or it feels good when I do this, or I love it when I can check it off the list, depending on how your kid thinks and how they are with routines and tasks and that kind of thing. And
Right.
so you can be supporting your kid and finding out what those passions are for them, and they can find their own path, regardless of how their brain happens to work or how they happen to operate in the world.
Absolutely. And then on top of it, they don't have to rail against anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember when I decided to go to art school. Now, this is no surprise. I had wanted to be a designer since I was 5. So my parents knew that I was a creative person. They knew I was going to design school. But when I actually did go, I remember my father saying something to me, something to the effect of, "Well, I hope you're ready to be a starving artist," And I'm like, why? Why does that have to be the case? And it absolutely was not the case. When I graduated college, I got a really good job and I had a really good job until I started my own business. And, so like that was never my story. But, it's like when you have your parents like place their story or their biases upon you, you feel like you have to sort of break out of that and you feel like you have to
Yeah.
fight against it.
Yeah.
Right. And so what you're talking about allows kids to be able to open up more, which is
Mhm.
so beautiful, especially in the space of exploring their spiritual gifts. So, from that perspective, what kind of advice would you give parents who are raising children who are sensitive, who are sort of opening up their spiritual gifts already, who I actually know quite a few of my friends who have kids who are literally they're like sensing energies and they're sensing things when they walk into a room and they're like, oh, I don't want to go in there, and it's not just like, little childhood fears. It's, they're really developing their gifts. So
Mm.
what is the advice you would give to these parents who are trying to navigate that?
Mhm, mhm. Well, going back again to helping them find the language.
Mm,
And then also, getting discerning about that energy too. If we can all relate, I was definitely that kid who was sensitive and empathic and took everybody's stuff on, and
yeah.
then tended to get into people pleasing sort of patterns because I wanted to stop feeling that way.
Mm,
If mom would stop feeling overwhelmed, I could stop feeling freaked out, right? And so
right.
I think, helping kids make that discernment of that's their energy, this is mine, can be really powerful. And along those lines, helping them stay grounded and centered is so key. And so modeling practices for the child, or inviting them in. Let's listen to this guided meditation. How did that feel for you? Or maybe doing some simple tapping or some breath work. I mean, there's a zillion practices, and hopefully the parent is utilizing a few of them and can share them with the child. Or if they're, taking on a lot of energy when they go out, let's get into the habit of zipping up our little bubble of protection before we leave the door every morning to go to school,
Yeah.
whatever that is, so that they're learning the language of where's my energy at and what can I do to get back into balance.
Right, right. So when it comes to the language that you're sort of using to then help the child through it, it's one thing if they sort of know what they're feeling, but what if they don't know what they're feeling? What if they don't know what this is exactly? And you kind of know, like your intuition is saying to you, I think they're opening up their gifts, or I think they're starting to sense things that they're not understanding. How would you broach that subject and what language would you use that's appropriate for children to talk about that?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I mean, keeping it simple, keeping it playful, keeping it light. But,
Mm,
the thing that I always drive home with parents when I talk to them is that no one is an expert on your kid the way you are. You know your kid, you've known them since day one, right?
yeah,
And especially if you're getting some intuitive pings about what's going on here, you know how to play this out, and this isn't gonna be the last opportunity you have to talk to your child about it. Maybe it's not today.
right.
Maybe it's when they, notice it again or when they're a little more grown up or whatever it is. We're always taught that we gotta listen to the experts, but you're
Right.
the expert, right?
Yeah.
And, parenting, I know this will come to some surprise, parenting is tough because
Yeah.
but,
Mhm.
a couple of the things that make it so tough is that you never really seem to find your sure footing. You get one phase figured out and they're on to the next phase.
Right,
Or
right.
you have one kid and you think, "Yeah, I got this figured out." And then the second kid is completely different,
Right.
right? I mean, we literally say altern completely opposite things to both of our kids because one is a perfectionist who will spend a day and a half doing a task and the other one is, good enough." And so we
Oh, how funny.
we give
Yeah.
opposite advice. "You know what? Done is good enough. Let's watch the perfectionism, right?" And the other one is like, "Let's spend 10 more minutes checking the work. You'll probably get a better grade."
Right.
Anyways, so yeah, it's like recognizing that it's hard and you always feel uncertain and you're never 100% sure, but you're probably the most knowledgeable person in the room. So go with your gut.
Right. So this is sort of to tag on to that a little bit. This is taking it just a tiny bit further. What would you say to a parent that, let's say, comes to you and says, we went to the doctor, they want to put my child on meds. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea because I think they're just overly sensitive, or I think that they're just feeling their emotions, or they're really opening up their psychic gifts, or whatever it happens to be. What would be your advice for them if they're asking you that?
Yeah, yeah. To me, and having had a kid, or I still have him, who has ADHD and dyslexia, but I mean, going through the whole public school thing, and
Yeah.
for me, the teachers were always pushing medication, and we tried absolutely everything before going that road. And then we did 3 different trials, and we didn't just throw them on the first one and keep them there. It's like, "No, no, no, this isn't working. This isn't our kid anymore."
Right.
But for me, it was, is this situation affecting his self-esteem or how he sees himself as a person? Because if he starts feeling like, "Oh, I can't do all the stuff the other kids do," or whatever, and starts feeling bad, then to me, that's a serious core issue that we've got to address.
Right.
But if they're feeling okay, what problem are we fixing here? Are we just making a doctor happy? Like,
Right.
we gotta do what's right for the child, and if there's no serious impact or nothing getting in the way, you can always change your mind next month or next year or whatever,
Mhm.
but keep, working it from all angles and figure that out. For my son, it was the 3rd med trial that we tried for him, and I'm not pro or against medication. Let me just say, you gotta do what's right for your child. But I had not actually been able to have a conversation with this kid because he would say something, and when I said something back, I'd lose him. His attention would go somewhere else. And so when the medication kicked in, because we were on a long-term one, he was able to answer me back, and it was the most amazing experience ever. And you could argue that that was all about me, but I do feel like that was also about how he was able to be in the world. So that was huge because then that helped him in school and with kids and how he operated in the world. So to me, that was worth it because that was a payoff that I think really benefited him. But if there's nothing that needs to be fixed, then maybe nothing needs to be done. Childhood is long, right?
Yeah,
We don't have
yeah.
to jump on things today or tomorrow. You can always do more research or figure out more things or say, I'm going to, parking lot that for a month and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, also you can work with the gifts that the child has as well, and sort
Right.
of see where those are going. And, if let's say the medication cuts off those gifts, the beautiful part of those gifts, then you can know, okay, well, maybe that's not the right one. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
In my brief experience with friends who have kids who have ADHD, and I had a really good friend in Chicago who did as well, that it's also not a lifelong solution. Like, it changes. So as you get older, as your body chemistry changes, as your everything changes. So it's like, whatever protocols or medications or whatever it is you're on are working for you at that moment, in 10 years, it might be completely different.
Yes.
So
If someone had told me when my son was small that there would be a time, and it was around 10, 11, that he wouldn't be so active, it was like he was motorized, I would have said, "No, I don't believe you. This is never going to change." And it did.
wow.
Like, who knew? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so you do all of this beautiful coaching, helping people on their self healing journeys. So, if somebody wants to book a session with you, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, jump into my website and click book an appointment and set up some time with me.
Beautiful. So, now do you work with couples, families, or just individuals?
All of the above.
Okay, wonderful. You can also reach Corilee on TikTok. Well, you can see her videos. She makes absolutely incredible videos on TikTok. I love watching all of your videos. I really, really do. It's like, I just like every time I see one, I'm like, oh, that's really good. Oh, I like that little nugget. Oh, that's really awesome. Yeah. So you can go and follow Corilee on TikTok at Corilee, Corilee, up and to the right, UPANDTOTHERIGHT. What we can do is we will put all of this information in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about spelling that out. If you want to just click on the link below, it'll be either in the YouTube video or in the show notes. You'll be able to reach Corilee that way. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been such an incredible conversation, because loving the healing journey and then taking it into so many different levels and places that you can take it. And the work that you're doing is so beautiful. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much, Annette. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks.
Have an amazing day and never stop exploring your soul, because it is the most important relationship you will ever have.
If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.